As a tech guy, one of the most common requests that people give me is, "Why is my computer so slow?" Well, the answer is the subject of today's Idea of the Day. One of the most interesting things about being a tech guy is that you get the same questions from people over and over and over. Everybody asks the same question. But it seems really weird that one of the most common questions is always, "Why is my computer so slow?" It's as if they expect me or any other tech person to just give them a pill. You know, just like you go to the doctor with a very simple thing. "I've got a headache," he says, "take an aspirin." And you just give that same pill to everybody and it fixes the problem. The trouble is most people have no idea about why their computer's slow, so they come to people like me looking for some sort of panacea, some cure-all that's going to make everything just hunky-dory again. It's not that simple, but I could tell you one of the most common reasons why this happens. And I'll start with the basics. There's a few reasons, but I'll give you a couple. More often than not, I'll ask them a very simple question. "Well, how old is your computer?" And they'll say, "Well, it's not that old. It's only about 5 or 6 years old by now. It was never this slow. It's just getting slower and slower every day." 5 or 6 years. I say, that's really old. I mean, for what it's worth, unless you paid a lot of money for it 5 or 6 years ago, it was probably junk then. By contrast, for example, I have one of my Macs from 2011. It's 2017 now, so I've had it 6 years. But it cost me $3,000 for that particular model. Actually, $3,200. And that computer today is still really, really fast compared to a lot of computers that you could buy in the low end of the price. It's still faster than Apple's low-end models to this day, and it's definitely faster than if you went to Best Buy and you bought a $300 computer. So, point one is if you do buy a low-priced computer, don't expect it to be fast forever. Chances are, if you buy a low-priced computer to start with, it's not really even that fast when it came out. Don't expect it to be fast later. But that brings us back to the original question that they'd say, "Well, it used to be fast." I'd say, "Used to be fast?" Well, let me just put it this way. Computers don't get slower. That is to say that they can still process the same number of transactions per second. If you wanted to rate it in terms of its clock speed, the same number of cycles per second. That doesn't change when they age. But what does change is the programs, that's the software that you run on it. Put it in perspective. If you go back and you take a computer that's 6 years old and you reinstall the operating system, meaning you put it the way it was the day you bought it, you hit the factory reset, it's back the way it was. On that day, provided you disconnect the cable to the internet, just humor me on this, you disconnect the cable from the internet, or you at least turn off Windows updates and updates of any type on any program you have. And you simply, from that day forward, only run the software you had 6 years ago. Meaning you run the same web browser, same version of that, same version of Office if you had that, same version of Windows. On that day 6 years ago, those programs were smaller and more efficient. But as time goes on, they know that people have newer, faster, and bigger computers. They have more RAM, they have more everything, they have faster drives. So programmers don't think twice about adding much more sophisticated features to their new program. So what ends up happening is, even though you can only process the same number of transactions per second, if every time you wiggle your mouse and you draw something or you do something, instead of it doing 3 things, which it did 6 years ago, it's now doing 300 things because they assume your computer's faster, it's going to seem slower. So essentially what I'm saying is if you want to run your old computer, you need to run old software. Otherwise, it's not going to keep up, because I got news for you. If I project out the size of Windows alone over the years, you would be shocked. At one point, Windows would fit on, let's say, just a few floppy diskettes, which, to put it in perspective, it would take about 800 floppy disks, actually to about 700 floppy disks to fill one CD. A DVD would probably be about 4,000 floppy disks. Windows is now taking up nearly 4,000 floppy disks, if you can understand that. That means that just daily operation of Windows, which used to be something that would fit on 4 floppy disks, is now 4,000 of them. Now, I'm not saying it's doing 4,000 times more stuff than it used to, but it's doing more. It's bigger, it's more complicated, it has all sorts of bells and whistles. So if your computer's getting slow, it's because you're using newer modern software. Now, it's not like you're trying to, by the way. You're just going to get them. You're going to get Windows updates. You're going to get updates to programs. You're going to go to websites that are more complex than they were 10 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it was. So put it in perspective. If your computer's slow, is it old? Is it possibly using outdated hardware? If you want to speed it up, really just either think about getting a new computer, or if you have an experienced technical person around, they could do two things. I'll give you the two practical things you could potentially do. If you have a computer without a lot of RAM, add as much as you could possibly add. I have 32 gig in my computers. And if possible, use a solid state hard drive. There's a drastic difference in speed. But even then, if you get to certain model computers, you pretty much max out at a certain level when you bought it. If you bought a low price computer and you got 6 years out of it, you did well. Get yourself another one. And that's today's idea of the day. All right, there it is. That's today's idea of the day. Some of them are pretty good, right? And some of them suck, I admit. First to admit, some of my ideas suck. But if you visit Idea of the Day every day and you subscribe to my channel by looking at the subscribe link in the corner, you'll see a brand new idea every single day. And I promise you, some of them don't suck.